We're doing a series on first world problems. Last week we talked about how one of the issues with living in a first world scenario is that we tend to live for ourselves rather than live for Christ. And it's very easy, even in the Christian culture, living in a first world country where we get used to even making Christianity about us. And so we start living for ourselves, even in those settings, even in those cultural ties and connections. Tonight I want to talk about a different issue that comes up with first world problems. When I was in middle school, I was not popular, to say the least. I was a loner kid. I was the outsider. I was the guy that was always good in class and always got picked on outside of class and sometimes got picked on inside of class. And so I developed this sort of strategy or personality to deal with being in middle school and high school. And my basic strategy was to make sure that no one knew anything about me at all. I kept people at a distance where I might be able to know a few things about them and I can go about my business and I can do well in class, but I am not going to share anything about my life or about me with any of these people, because if I do that, then I'm opening myself up to some kind of hurt or attack or ridicule, because if they know something about me, they can pick on it. And so it was my strategy to keep things as shallow as possible to protect myself. But I missed out on having friends. I missed out on connecting with people. I missed out on being able to connect with people about the love of Christ because I was so concerned about worrying about my own safety. This culture that we live in today is very much the same as that. Shallow. We live in a shallow culture. We live in a shallow world. If you consider it, look at your own life, you might run into this, or you might know someone that deals with the shallow situation when it comes down to your looks or your reputation. Basically, your basic appearance, where you make sure that you look a certain way. You worry about the clothes you wear, the makeup that you have on, whether you're skinny, whether you're fat, whether you're ripped, whether you look like me, or that's a good thing, by the way. I'm joking. Joke, you're allowed to laugh. I'm joking. Whether you look like me, or if you look like Captain America, or whoever you look like, you are concerned about all of that. And you are concerned about what people think of you and how you come across. You might deal with the situation not so much about how you physically look, but you might deal with this in what car you drive, or what the public opinion of you is, what your reputation is at work or at school, or how people are talking about you. You're concerned about what people think about how you raise your family, and you're scared to yell at your kids or not yell at your kids in public because you're scared of what people are going to think of you, because that affects your reputation, and that all has to do with your appearance. And you are so terrified in that situation with all of those things to show anything that doesn't fit your ideal picture. Because if you for 1 second drop the cover, take off the mask, reveal the facade, and show what you really look like, or what your family's actually like, or your real financial situation, or whatever it is that you've kind of covered up, you're scared that if you get rid of that, people are going to automatically reject you. People are going to turn away from you. You're going to be abandoned. You're going to lose any kind of status and value that you've gained by putting up all these nice pictures around you. And that might work for a while, but the problem is you are never able to relax. You are constantly putting on a show. You are never able to take a break because somebody might see something different. And even more painful is the fact that when you start looking at yourself that way, it becomes very natural for you to judge other people by the same value system. And it becomes very difficult for you to see beyond the facade of everybody else. And so you look at someone and you make judgments about how they appear rather than who they are because that's how you live in your life. You want people to judge you by how you appear and not how you really are. You might deal with this, or you might see someone who deals with this in their a little bit closer, their intimate relationships or their connections with people. Now, this can be within your family. This can be between kids and their parents. It can be between spouses. It can be between aunts and uncles. It can be between you and your grandparents. It can be you and your friends. It would be a couple that's dating, okay? And what you do in this scenario is not so much you make sure people only see certain things, but you do not reveal anything that you are scared for people to see. Now, this can be an opinion that you have or something you've done in the past. It could be a past failure, a past sin. It can be something about your history that you're uncomfortable with and you don't know how people will handle. It could be something about something you're struggling with now and you really don't want anybody to see it. It could be people in the church. You just really don't want them to see that aspect of you, like in the relationship, because you are so scared that if somebody finds out what's really underneath, you're going to lose that relationship. That people will not want you, that they will abandon you, they will reject you, they will judge you, and they will hurt you if they see what's really underneath. And so sins go unconfessed, and you're trapped in this box where you're never able to actually be honest with yourself or with anyone else. And you keep it shallow because it's safe. But you're always living in fear. You might deal with this in a different way. You might see someone deal with this in a different way where it has to do with dealing with conflict or differences. It is a big one that we see, especially with people my age, is that we are big on finding the similarities. We want everybody to get along. We want to make sure that we can work through problems and just really get along. And by work through problems, that means ignore the problem and just keep focusing on what we have in common. Bring it to the lowest common denominator so that we're all together in one big group. Find out the one similarity and hold to that. It doesn't matter any differences. We're just going to ignore those and we're going to hold tight. But when a difference or a conflict does arise, you might see some way that what they do when that happens is they will either completely ignore the situation or person, or they will become hostile to the situation or to the person. They will avoid it, trying to remove themselves from it so they don't have to deal with it and maintain that level of tolerance. Or they will become hostile towards it in a way that beats it down and keeps it from becoming any bigger of a problem. And they do this, one, because they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to be proven wrong. They don't want to be hurt by it. And They don't really see the value in working through the problem. Problems just get in the way of things. So if we ignore it or shut it down, then I'm safe. This world that we've created is safe. These relationships that I have are safe. And so we keep it shallow by either ignoring it completely or becoming hostile towards it so it remains one-sided and you remain in control. Because if you're in control, you have the delusion of being safe. The problem with that is you never actually deal with anything. So, when it comes right down to it, we can probably relate to this. But what is it that's missing from this nature? Is there actually any problem with being shallow? Well, yes. We see this in the story of David. In 1 Samuel chapter 16, we see Samuel come looking for a replacement for the current king. The current king is Saul. Saul is a tall man. He's a rugged man. He looks handsome. He's strong. He has this command of authority. He is what you would picture as a king. And he was an idiot. And so God tells Samuel, go, I want you to find a guy to replace him. And so Samuel goes, and he goes to this family, and he says to the father Jesse, he says, bring up all your sons. God's going to pick one of them to be king, the next king. He's like, great. So he gets all his sons, he lines them up, and Samuel looks at them, and they're walking towards him, and he's like, that one. That one's got to be it. He looks apart. God says, nope, that's not the one. Samuel says, really? Look at him. He looks like a king. Nope, it's not the one. Next son comes, he's like, oh, that one. It's got to be that one then. Nope. No. He goes down through all the sons that are there, and God says no to each one of them. And he's like, well, God, you said there's going to be one of these guys. Where is he? So Samuel says to Jesse, do you have any more sons? And he says, yep, he's out in the field. I'll go get him. And he comes, and it's David. And David is the youngest of his brothers. He's the shortest. He's the one that was humble. He was out in the field working. He wasn't picked to come in to be king. And God says, that's the one. That's the one. And Samuel's like, really? That one? And God says to Samuel, he says, Samuel, you've got to understand. Man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. Man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. You got to get to the heart of the matter to figure out what's really going on. And when we look at Jesus, we see an incredible example of how to actually deal with that. Jesus, throughout his life, had to deal with the shallow world. He spoke to the Pharisees, and he confronted the Pharisees because he said to them, you guys worry about washing the outside of your cup. You make sure that the dish looks really, really nice, but you don't worry about the inside of the cup. Which is ridiculous, because where does the food go? To the inside of the cup. And so what you need to be doing is you need to be washing the inside and not worrying so much about the outside. And he said, you're doing this with your lives. You are worried about how you look and not worried about what's inside of your heart. There was another time that Jesus dealt with them. They were at the temple, and they were watching people put money into the offering box at the temple. And this one guy came in and he gave this huge donation of money. And everyone's like, wow, look at him. He's being so generous. He cares so much about the church. And then this little old widow came by, and she put in 2 little pennies. No one noticed, except for Jesus. And he said, between the 2 of those, which one gave the most? The widow. because she gave everything she had. And the rich man just gave a small portion of the vast sum that he had. It looked good, but it came from a shallow heart. See, when you start digging deep into the heart of the matter, you will see both good and bad. You will see something like the Pharisees, where the inside of the cup is dirty. And then you'll see something like the little widow, where you'll see something pure and innocent and holy. And because we're humans, typically when you look inside of our hearts and the hearts of others, you will notice something good and something bad. And again, we look at Jesus. It says in John chapter 1 that Jesus came full of grace and truth. Grace and truth. And what grace and truth is, and what Jesus brought, was something like glasses. Glasses affect your vision, how you see things. And specifically, they affect how you see things on the surface. But what grace and truth do is they help you see clearly what's in the heart. What's in your heart and in other people's hearts. And so if you were to put on grace and truth like Jesus, you would be able to see the heart of the issue. You would be able to see the value of the good and the correction of the wrong. So, if we deal with appearances, looks, reputation, all that stuff, you would see a contrast if you were to apply grace and truth to that. You would see that your value is not found in your appearance. Finding your value in appearance is shallow. Your value is in the fact that God made you and He died for you and He saw the mess that you were in and that you are and loves you anyways. That's your value. Everything else around it isn't your value. That's truth. The grace side of it is that He sees that you're still not perfect and He still loves you. Where that comes into effect in our lives and how we act and how we treat people is we stop making it so much about what we can look like, and we start valuing people not for what they look like, but for who they are. And you start to see them both with grace and truth. And you see the messes that they're in, the messes that they are, and you see the good that is in them, and you start seeing value in their lives that nobody else sees. You can look at someone that is dirty or rotten or frustrating or just a pain in everybody's neck, and you can look at them and you can see them completely different. Because you can see beyond the surface. You can see to the heart of the matter, and you can see with truth and grace that God loves them too. And that He has built value in them, whether they accept it or not. When it comes down to relationships, when you look through things and you deal with things with the grace and truth of Jesus, you start to see your relationships not so much as a safety net that you need to create these boundaries and surroundings for to keep it locked and keep you comfortable in your relationships, but you see them as vulnerable scenarios where you need to have commitment in order to be vulnerable with each other. Essentially, you see relationships as an opportunity to look at each other critically and work through the issues. And that you refuse to keep everything shallow. You refuse to hide anything from each other, and you embrace the idea of being open and honest in such a way that they can be honest with you about everything that's going on in their lives, and you can be open and honest with them and everything going on in their lives, and not in a way that says, well, this is everything that's going on, like it or leave it. But this is what's going on. This is the truth. Now, do you have grace to work with me through it. And that's what's going on in your life. That's the truth. Do I have the grace to work with you through it? Grace and truth. And as it comes down to conflict, ignoring or becoming hostile to people and to ideas is shallow. But if we take the grace and truth of Jesus, we start seeing people and issues as more than what they appear. And we start to see these things as something that needs to be worked out, that there is value in working through the problems. Instead of just kind of ignoring it or brushing it off, we look at it critically and we don't take it so personally. It's not about being right. It's about figuring out what the proper solution is. It's about, how do I help in this situation? Not how do I prove that I'm right? How do I prove that you're wrong? How do I prove that I've always been right? But how do I help? And it creates this balance where it's both accepting of the person and the situation, but also full of truth in that you are trying to dig down to the heart of the matter and see it for what it really is. Where you don't compromise your standards and you don't compromise the values and you don't back away from issues of priorities and the calling of Christ on matters and issues. But you hold tightly to them and deal with them not with pride, but with grace. We live in a shallow culture. And the way to change that is like Christ. Christ dealt with it, with grace and truth. And so, how many of you have glasses at home? Glasses or sunglasses, either one. Okay? If you got glasses anywheres, I want you to go home, I want you to hold them up, and I want you to think of one lens as grace and one lens as truth. And every time that you put those glasses on or you deal with those glasses over this next week, I want you to think about grace and truth as how you should be looking at the people and the situations in your life and looking at yourself. So that you're not just seeing the shallow surface thing, but you get to the heart of the matter through grace and truth.